And we are live.
All right, welcome everybody to our March 10th Arts Council meeting. Is everyone here? Yes. The time is now 6:37. Hi, I'm Erin Vivian, Chair of the Arts Council. In accordance with Proclamation 20-28.11 and the Governor's extended Safe Start Order, tonight's Arts Council meeting is using video conferencing technology provided by Zoom. The video of this meeting is being broadcast live via Zoom and will be uploaded to the city's YouTube channel later this evening. City staff Sarah Bluvas and Ryan Daly, consultant Emily Moon, and council member Salim Neese are participating in tonight's meeting remotely. Other public audience members may be listening to the meeting by telephone or via the internet. Welcome to all, and thank you for joining us tonight. Board members, please ensure that your microphones are turned on for the roll call. Will staff please call the roll call?
Erin Vivian.
Here.
Amy Barnes. Anu Meha.
Here.
Eric Gordon. Shishi Shakes.
Here.
Suzanne Scone.
Here.
And Gayleen Baden.
Here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. All right, first tonight we'll review and consider approving the February 10th regular minute meetings and the February 23rd special minute meetings. Board members may have a motion to approve the minutes of the February 10th meeting. Can I make a motion? I will move to approve the minutes. So moved by me. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you. There's a motion by me, Erin Vivian, and a second by Anu Meha. Staff, please conduct a roll call vote.
Okay, Amy Barnes. Anu Meha.
Here.
Okay. Eric Gordon. Shishi Shakes.
Yes.
Suzanne Scone.
Approved.
And Gayleen Baden.
So I wasn't there, so I normally don't vote on minutes if I wasn't at the meeting because I don't have the contact, but is it necessary because of, do we have enough people that I can not vote, or do I need to vote to make a quorum?
So I thought the rule was that you couldn't make the motion if you weren't there. You can't move to approve, but you can vote to approve. I think that's the rule. So since two people who were at the meeting moved to approve it, you can, or you can abstain because we will have enough with.
Okay, I'm going to abstain then.
Okay. And then Erin Vivian.
Approved.
Okay, passes.
Okay, the motion passes and the minutes are approved. Do we need to do the same for the other set of minutes?
Yes, we do.
All right, sorry. So do I have a motion to approve the minutes of our special meeting on February 23rd?
So moved. So moved.
Do we have a second? Gayleen moved.
I'll second.
Anu Meha, thank you. Seconded. Sarah, can you do the roll?
Yep. Okay, Anu Meha.
Yes.
Eric Gordon. Shishi Shakes.
I was absent, so I will abstain.
Okay. Suzanne Scone.
Approve.
Gayleen Baden.
Approved.
Erin Vivian.
Approve.
And Amy Barnes. Absent. Okay, thank you.
All right. So tonight's agenda will not include in-person public appearances in accordance with Proclamation 20-28-11 and the Governor's Extended Safe Start Order. However, individuals wishing to speak live during the appearances portion of our meeting may do so by telephone or Zoom, provided they signed up. Did anyone sign up?
No, we don't have any appearances signed up for tonight.
Okay, then we will move on. We now welcome Sarah Bluvas, Economic Development Coordinator, to provide a staff update. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you. So I just have a quick update for you all on a couple of projects. I'm going to share my screen. There we go. Okay, can you all see this? Cool. Okay, so I just wanted to give you all a reminder that the Island Lanterns project is closing to the public this Friday. It's been open for a month. It opened on February 12th and even survived the crazy snowstorm we had. The project was really well received by the community and by the participants. It was featured in the Mercer Island Reporter a couple of times. And I included a couple of comments from different participants here on this slide. I'm planning on kind of sending a wrap up out to everyone who participated, and I'll include the Arts Council as well. I think it would be great for the time being to keep the page up on the city's website, which includes a video that Carol Whitaker and Zainab Alev made from MyVol of all of the different lanterns in the project, as well as some photographs of them installed. So I think it'll be a great project to keep up and have the project live on a little bit longer. I am working with MyVol and the other community partners who participated in the project to return the lanterns to the artists. Some of them are interested in getting them back. So we'll be working on that over the weekend, or finding new homes for them. We've had some inquiries from a couple of different entities, including some of the senior living facilities on the island who were interested in bringing some lanterns over to their locations or having residents hang them in their rooms, that kind of thing. So Carol from MyVol has been kind of the key contact on that end. And then we're also exploring if it may make sense to hang some of the lanterns in different business windows around town center to keep the project going. So really exciting and fun project. And I hope if you haven't had a chance to get out to Mercerdale Park, that you all will go see it before Friday, or you'll see me on Friday out there with a ladder taking them down. So that is actually the key update I have for you right now. I'm happy to answer any questions about that project or the life of the lanterns as they may live on, if you all have any.
I thought they were really pretty, if that matters. Thanks for doing it.
I agree too. I really liked them, and it would be nice to continue, let them live on somewhere here on the island. I like that idea.
I know within the Chinese community, there was a lot of appreciation for being included and requested their participation. So.
And if anyone has any ideas for other places or other organizations we might reach out to gift them a lantern or anything like that, let me know, because I agree it would be fun to have them continue on. I think one of my favorite comments from a participant was about how the lanterns hanging all together, they're all close and kind of flowing in the wind, and it's just really interesting thinking about that in relation to having to be socially distanced right now. So I do know that a lot of people who participated took a lot away from it, and then also heard just overwhelming positive from the community who checked out the project. So hopefully we can keep it going somehow.
That's fabulous. Thank you. Does anyone have any other further comments or questions on that update?
I might make a comment just
Right.
for the record. the lanterns were amazing. And I actually walked over on a snowy day to look at them, and I've really kept an eye on them and watched people interact with them, jumping up and touching them. I wondered if they were going to mess with them or something, but they were just really enjoying them. But I did notice, or I feel like the aesthetics of the entry of the park, the way the hedges are so tall and the tree is so large with the branches going down to the ground, kind of takes away from the pergola that to me should be more of the entry to the park. So I think, you know, having a landscape architect maybe look at that long term. It's kind of like we have this beautiful park, but then we put a wall in front of it and say, don't look into the park, you know. And whereas we probably want to think about drawing people into the park instead of trying to build a wall between, visually, for me, it's a wall. So I'm just asking you to think about that.
I have a comment on that. Because I've thought the same thing also, but just another point to think about, and I don't know if this was done intentionally, is that pergola serves as sort of a stage, and those bushes somewhat serve as a like backdrop to the stage, right? I don't know if that was an intentional thing. In normal times when we used to have performances there.
Oh, that's a good point.
So I don't know if that's why that was done.
Thanks. Well, that's all I got for now, Erin.
Okay. All right. So our first item of regular business is to continue. I'm off mute. The Arts Reset discussion, which is a part of the city's overall effort to develop a reset plan for recreation, the community and event center, and the arts. We're joined again tonight by consultant Emily Moon, who will present recommendations and lead the discussion about the immediate action plan for the arts. Welcome, Emily.
Great. Thank you very much. Happy to be here. Hello, Arts Council. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started. All right, everybody see that okay? Great, thank you. Okay, so in our last meeting, it was a workshop and you all had a great discussion. We had an opportunity to present you with some of the data from the member survey that we did. Lots of great ideas. We felt like there were some themes in that data. We brought forward about a half dozen kind of themes. We grouped your input in that way, and then you discussed what felt to you as actionable items. We had some discussion around what would fit kind of the parameters of the immediate action plan. And just as a reminder, what we're talking about when we use that term is something that the Arts Council can get off the ground before the end of 2021, something that keeps in mind this changing nature of the pandemic and some of the constraints that we've had to operate with. I'm very, very hopeful that those are becoming more limited in number and extent as we go forward. But that is part of the criteria that we're looking at for the immediate action plan. Our hope was to come up with a few things that felt actionable and feasible during this time, and that we could go back to the City Council, share that plan. You'll recall that they have asked us to do some work thinking about how to reset and implement arts services and programming in the future after the pandemic reduced resources for recreation, for the community center, for arts, and several other areas of the city. And so our goal is to come up with a few things that we can do near term, the immediate action plan, and then to continue some discussions and start to plan for a more comprehensive reset, that longer term plan. And so the last couple of meetings, we've been trying to focus our conversation on the immediate. And tonight, we're going to further refine based on your workshop conversation and see if we can put enough detail on the plan so that we're able to refine something in early February at the latest, and then share that with the city council. If there's a need to ask for some resources in order to implement those action items, we can take that back to council. You'll recall that we're trying to get some response back to them in April, May timeline, so that there's enough time to secure the resources that are needed, to get the city council's feedback on that plan, and to implement something, say, as early as this summer. So that's our goal. So tonight, we're going to talk about immediate action plan. Before we do that, I'm going to share just a little bit of information about where we're headed with the Recreation and Community Event Center reset plan. They're going through.
Can I just
good.
make note that you're not presenting in this full slide view. We can see the next
okay.
slide in the notes.
Thank you.
There are no
I
notes.
appreciate that. Thank
And
you.
then just going back to the last slide, you said that the council wanted feedback no later than early February, but obviously that's.
Oh, sorry, misstatement. Yes.
When does the
Thank you,
council want?
Salim.
Yeah.
So our hope was, I'm trying to find, Salim, I haven't had this issue before. Do you know where, display settings maybe? No.
Yeah,
Sarah?
it's that swap.
If you swap view.
Presenter, yeah.
Swap view? Okay. How's that, you guys? No can
Still
do.
waiting. It hasn't changed yet.
Oh, here we go. It says, how about that?
No change yet.
You may have to stop sharing and share again.
And share again?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Apologize for this.
I was just gonna say it doesn't bug me that much to have it that way. I mean, do we need to have it full screen?
Well,
Is it better that way?
ideal. I think we've got a couple slides that have a little bit more text on them. How's that look?
Same.
Still the same, but you can move the right pane like to be smaller in width.
Just enlarge it.
Or just not show it in presentation mode. You can just scroll through the slides.
Mm-hmm. That didn't do it. Not finding how to make it bigger.
Okay, well, I thought I'd mention it.
I appreciate it,
Okay.
and I'm sorry. I didn't realize that it was in this view, but I'm not finding how to fix that at this point. Sarah, the only other thing that I can think of is for you to share and drive. It's not a hard presentation to drive.
I'm happy to do that. Whatever.
Emily, if you go back to those three dots, there was a line that said hide presenter view down below. That just took it down. Sorry.
All right. Okay, now I can't even get the. What are you guys seeing right now?
The full view of PowerPoint, so we can see the sidebar on
Awesome.
the left.
Yeah, that's fun. I can't even get it to go from beginning here.
I agree with Aaron that this isn't, we can just ignore it at
Yeah.
least so far.
All right, so we'll roll with it. I apologize, everyone. Okay, so before we get talking about Arts Council immediate action plan ideas, I will spend just a tiny bit of time talking about where we are with recreation and the community and event center reset phasing plan. We will be presenting a full draft plan to the Parks and Recreation Commission on March 18th. And I encourage all of you to take a look at their packet for that meeting or to watch along in the meeting, and you can learn everything that you'd possibly want to know about where they're headed with their reset plan. We've spoken a little bit in the past about what they're planning to do for their immediate action plan. They are focusing largely on delivering summer camp this summer, and also reserving time and energy to continue to work on their master plan for phasing and resetting recreation and community and event center programming. We're going to also talk about the timeline for the remainder of the reset project with the Arts Council tonight. So just a few highlights from recreation and the Community Event Center. As we've discussed before, they're approaching their plan in a slightly different manner, as they have been also dramatically impacted and have a unique opportunity with the facility closed, with a need to rehire staff in order to deliver programming. And so there's a focus on how to build back in a way that is financially feasible in part, and an opportunity to re-examine community priorities and think about how to fine tune what's being offered to address those priorities. Also, they're very cognizant of the fact that there are still restrictions on occupancy, for example, in the building. And so we're thinking about all the contingencies that we need to on that front. One of the things that we'll continue to underscore as we bring back their reset strategy to the city council is that the city may not offer every single category of program or activity that it did in the past, nor every single individual activity that it did in the past. So that's something to keep in mind. Again, we're using the word reset very purposefully. This is not just a restart of what once was. It's an opportunity to think about doing things maybe a little differently, or a different set of things. So in part, we're also trying to build out a new system that allows them to do some assessment on the front end and thinking about what they want to offer, what they should offer, and evaluate programs as they are run, and do some piloting of programs, and then run an evaluation program after that activity has run the season, for example. And so I've listed on this screen some of the factors that we think will be part of that analysis tool as we go forward. I know this Arts Council has had some discussion about program evaluation as well. So I thought this might be a highlight from the rec reset that might resonate with all of you, that this group will also be engaged in doing that kind of work in the future. So the reset plan for recreation and the community center, beyond the immediate action plan, which carries us until the end of this year, includes a phase one. This is draft plan. I should continue to say that, draft plan. And we're still discussing it with Parks and Recreation Commission. But the draft plan, phase one, would be until the remainder of 2021. And that would include bringing the facility back online to permit some facility rentals, some limited public activities in the building, focus on getting both some tax supported programs and services off the ground, and some programs and services that are primarily paid by the users, of participants, the beneficiaries of those programs. So we have this balancing that's happening in their portfolio. And during phase one, they'll also be looking at how they can begin to offer things like school break programming, thinking about winter break later this year, perhaps. And they'll be reserving quite a bit of their time to also think about how to get ready for phase two, where a great deal more programs and activities would come online. One thing that's really important to note about the timing of phase one and the development of phase two is it is highly likely that as we go back to the city council to talk about the phasing that we'd like to do, that we'll be presenting this overall look that you see here in April, get the feedback from the city council in May, and be ready to run, hopefully, with the phase one activities in June or soon thereafter. And that we expect, therefore, to have to go back in just a few months later to start talking about what we'll need and how we can be ready for phase two, which starts in 2022. So thinking about the ramp and the lead time that is needed to get programs and activities going, including hiring staff, training staff. We'd anticipate being right back in front of city council in late summer, early fall, at the latest, to talk about the plan for 2022. So a lot of clustered discussions about getting programs and services up and running in recreation and at the community event center. And then in phase two, our hope would be to offer some other programs and services that meet the needs of more populations of the city, more groups, perhaps start preschool age programming as one of the highlights that I have here on this screen, possibly some community-wide special events that could be held at the community center. And again, reserving some time and energy to get focused on development of phase three. In phase three, we would hope that we have laid the groundwork and have set that foundation, as we call phase one, and that we have built up from there, created some bones on the skeleton to provide some structure for the division to go forward. And then by 2023, hopefully be better established and begin to offer more programs and activities again, reach more populations. And I've listed a few examples of the types of programs and services that are found in the draft plan for phase three. They include mixed age programming, family-based programming, adult and youth activities and programs. So tonight, I'll pause and answer any questions that you have. As I said, we're still working with the Parks and Recreation Commission right now to continue to gather their feedback and refine that plan. But we wanted to give you a quick snapshot of where they're headed, what their timeline looks like, remind you of the same process that they're going through and the fact that they have to do some things in sequence in order to have the resources to continue to run programs and services, particularly at the community center. Are there any questions that I could answer about the recreation reset? Okay, all right, let's get to Arts Council stuff. Last time, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'm curious how they're making their decisions about things like preschool with like the guidance is changing constantly.
Yeah, excellent question. Excellent question. We will have to keep that guidance in mind as we go forward. For example, if nothing changes from today, the community center can either, depending on the type of use, have 25% or 50% occupancy. And so we're going to have to do that calculus at the moment that we're ready to market a program. Is this the right time? Does it look like it makes sense to do? Or can we actually facilitate the use to meet those guidelines? You know, can we keep kids separated? So we're trying to stay flexible. We're also trying to be very mindful. Your question also about how are they making decisions. What I would offer is we've gone through 2 months of discussions about the framework for that decision making, and they are largely using an approach that we call cost recovery and resource allocation. And they're using that as part of their model and decision-making structure. And they're also using other inputs like a community survey that was conducted in part of January and part of February. And they're looking at past programs and successes and demands and a bunch of data. But overall, the structure that we're looking to implement is a structure that creates a balance in the programming and use of the center between activities that serve primarily individuals and programs and services that serve the community as a whole. And that between those two sides of this kind of paradigm, in a way, you will get revenue producing programs that can help support the programs that need a little bit more tax subsidy. And those tax subsidy programs tend to be the ones that serve either lower income groups, underrepresented populations, tend to serve the community as a whole. For example, if you offer a special event at the community center, you don't often charge a fee for that. That's a tax supported activity. But the private rental of a room at the community center for a wedding could provide the revenue that helps to support those community-wide beneficial programs. Great. Okay, so last time we had a great conversation. Sarah and I debriefed and felt that there were maybe 3 labels we could attach to your input, your discussion last time. And so we're calling those 3 buckets or topic areas: community engagement and collaboration, policy development and updating, and then the long-term phased approach to services. And we're going to talk about each one separately, but I wanted to pause here and just kind of take the pulse and ask, does this fit with your recollection that you could maybe sort the comments that you heard from your colleagues into these different buckets?
Just the thing that struck me first was the word services. I don't know why. I feel like the Arts Council primarily doesn't provide services as much as programming. The word just struck me as odd in regards to Arts Council. I don't know. That might just be me though.
Okay, I don't see any other hands.
So I guess my question then is like,
Sure.
the type of programming that Arts Council has typically offered, maybe won't anymore, but things that were popular, like, you know, music in the park. Is
Mhm.
that something that's considered under that third prong?
Yes, so,
Is that
Erin,
what services,
yeah,
like, is
I,
that we're
I
terming
think
that word?
yeah, I think I just get tired of saying programs and services, services and programs. I mean one and the same.
Okay.
And I'm happy to use whatever term you'd like to use there, and we can continue to refine that. But if we can go forward just thinking that by services, we mean anything that the Arts Council might do. I would say it is a service that the Arts Council provides, for example, when the Arts Council is making decisions about use of the 1% Public Art Fund. That's a service, but maybe you think of it as a program too. But I mean both. I mean some term that will capture the range of your activities.
Cool.
Okay. All right, so let's dig in and talk about the first one. So the first one was community engagement and collaboration. So what Sarah and I did is we said, let's try to see if we can get enough detail around an idea that we could communicate it to the city council and say, this is where we're headed, and get some feedback back from them. And if we're able to be specific enough and identify some needed resources, then great, we shall do that. We spoke last time about a desire to stay a little bit flexible and we don't need to decide right now, you know, what day of the week is this happening on and who exactly is going to be there, and how exactly is it going to be carried out. We can continue to work on those finer details over time. Our hope is to at least be able to express to the city council the gist of our ideas, give them a sense of where we're headed, and again, get their feedback. So Sarah and I said that one possible action that the Arts Council could consider, and we heard this from several members last time, was to convene a listening opportunity with the arts organizations and maybe artists in the community to discuss the impacts of the pandemic on the arts community. So first, provide just a forum to talk, to share, and that might enable the Arts Council to do two things: is just get a better understanding of what is needed at this moment or in the near future. I think we heard many of you express a desire to do that. Secondly, it could provide an opportunity for the Arts Council to gather some ideas and identify partners, collaborators on a possible public art project. And some of you thought that might be a great thing to do in the remainder of 2021, to allow people to process the pandemic a little bit, or create some art that commemorates the pandemic, share, connect with each other. So I'm going to pause right there, ask for feedback on that idea, that outline of an idea. How does that resonate? Does that seem to kind of bring together a few things that we spoke about last time?
It does.
Great. Great. Any tweaks? What about the two-pronged purpose? Does that seem to still be a good fit?
I think so.
My only question is whether that leaves, like, in terms of timing, if we are wanting to do something like commemorate how the pandemic is affecting individuals and including artists in our community, whether the timing works out for this.
Sure. And Galen, I would just say, I would hope so. I would hope that we could also execute on this idea pretty quickly after we get feedback. And I would even suggest There's some groundwork that we could start to do before we might even get a full green light from City Council. And in particular, I would feel comfortable doing that if there wasn't really a financial commitment, for example, on behalf of the city to pull this off. And we haven't gotten there yet, but I can certainly envision this being a no to low cost endeavor, at least this first part, just convening the meeting.
Go ahead.
Oh, I have a question about the timeline as well. So the April, May, and June timeframe, is that for basically planning this event? Because I just don't see the great value of doing this virtually. I think it seems like it's worthwhile planning and really spending the time listening into the local artist community to plan something when we can gather in person and make it a celebratory event to really commemorate what the community has lost and gained through the pandemic.
Sure. So let me touch on that line, since we haven't really discussed it in full yet. Timing, as Sarah and I saw it, was to perhaps try to think about how to design that listening opportunity. So let's talk about it as being a meeting. So design what the meeting is going to look like, invite people to it. We could even perhaps do that as early as April, send out those invitations, have the event, the meeting occur in May, talk to artists, talk to arts organizations in May, get their ideas about possibly collaborating on a public art project, but also listen to their concerns and impacts, have the Art Council gain maybe a better understanding of where its priorities might need to be near term, and then have a subsequent Arts Council conversation that synthesizes all that information and says, okay, what do we do with it? Did it seem like we had enough traction around maybe doing some kind of commemorative event? What would that look like? What do we need in order to get that off the ground? Or did it not seem like that was a desired outcome from the listening opportunity meeting? And instead, we heard X, Y, and Z. And now we want to try to shape up some other kind of response that fits those needs. So that evaluation and identifying of next steps would be in June. So I think there's still time to absorb where we are with the state's pandemic response and whether or not that commemorative kind of event would be one that needs to be an online kind of activity or be in-person activity. I think this is still flexible with that.
Question.
That makes sense. Thank you for clarifying.
Sure.
Well, Shishi, was your question to do some of the planning in person or the event in person?
The event, I guess the event itself needs being defined.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if we can do planning in person, depending on how things evolve with state regs, I think we should push in that direction. I mean, there certainly could, we're probably not that far out from having gatherings of 20 people in a room that are 6 feet apart or whatever. So with a facilitator and a whiteboard, I think it would be worth keeping open to that idea. And while I have the floor, I'd like to say on the action item, convene a listening opportunity with Mercer Island Arts or organization and artists. I would just stop it there, period, rather than continue to discuss impacts of pandemic on the arts community. I think that's going to get discussed no matter what, but if I was in the artist or arts organization, I'd like to go to the purpose, which I think is clearly articulated here and I think sounds really good. But I just didn't know if that's if the action item was to discuss the impacts of the pandemic. Is that what we're really trying to do? Is that the number one thing? Are we trying to move on to the next thing?
Sure. Thank you for your comment. Yeah, I think we could keep it broader and also
What broader
have,
would be taking out the pandemic?
correct. And like you suggested, I think we could have that as our annotated script to maybe tease that as a topic when we get together, that might be one of the things that we're eager to hear about. But we haven't designed any of that marketing. So I appreciate the feedback, and we can think about what's going to draw people in.
Well,
Thank
draw
you
people
for
in
that.
and also put their energy in. I mean, because if
Yeah.
you're asking them to come talk about the details of the pandemic impact on them, are you asking them to come talk about how can we move forward with some ideas for our community?
Great.
I'm
Thank
going
you.
to jump in, Suzanne. That was a great point. And I see Galen's hand has been up, and I want to ask you a question, Galen, because maybe it just went over my head and I missed the point of your question before. And I'm wondering if it was answered. And my question is, do you have actually a slide that with a visual of our timeline of when we're approaching city council with our plans? It seems like our plan is in 2 phases. One, to approach city council with a minor ask for staff time in order to gather input from the community, to create a plan, to go back to city council to ask for the major plan, what arts council is going to look like, what funding we're going to have. And when is that second piece going to happen? Is it going to happen after June?
It's an excellent question. I don't have an answer for you, quite frankly. I think it's a product of how quickly we work. Our goal was to try.
So when is the Parks and Rec? I mean, don't they have a defined plan of when they are going to city council to ask for their full plan approval? When is that?
So yes, let me help you understand their timeline. So on April 20th, there will be a joint meeting between the City Council and the Parks and Recreation Commission. At that meeting, we're anticipating that the comprehensive reset plan for recreation and the community center will be presented. That plan will lay out the philosophy. It will also lay out a phase-by-phase approach to the reset. They have already asked and received some implementation resources for their phase 1, which is implementing, for their immediate action plan. So implementing the summer camp programming. And on April 20th, they will also present the phase 1 request for resources. So that will get them only the resources to provide for the remainder of the proposed 2021 programs and activities, services. Then we're expecting they would have to come back after they get that initial feedback from council on how city council thinks of the whole plan in its entirety. They would likely have to come back to the city council again in late summer, early fall, to be asking for their phase 2 implementation resources so that they could get the resources they need for 2022, which is the phase 2. And then again, they'll probably be coming back another 6 months later to have a conversation about phase 3 in 2023.
Okay, so the only thing that's really on the calendar now is phase 1.
Phase
or
1
Parks and Rec.
resource ask plus they are providing their, in essence, an immediate action plan and their long-term reset plan on April 20th.
Can I jump in with?
Yeah, please.
So what I took away from our last meeting, and perhaps I'm wrong, but my understanding was that one of the things we were talking about is actually considering and going into community for feedback on creating a art project that would be mixed media opportunity for people to commemorate through art, through music, through visual art, through poetry, how the pandemic is affecting them. And that my perception of that was that that would be something that would be a shorter term thing, while it's still very impactful on people's lives. Not something that would be like a retrospective of how that did impact me, or commemorating how I'm resolved from it. So that was one of my questions concerning the timeline.
Sure. And I think at the end of the meeting, what I gathered was that was one option. Another option was, let's go and ask if that's what people want to do. And if we have willing partners and contributors to that, test that assumption before we actually go and ask, before we tell City Council that's what we're going to do, and the community that's what we're going to do, and before we ask for any needed resources to do that thing. So that is what Sarah and I are showing on the screen, is first having the conversation, making sure that's indeed what you want to try to implement. But if you don't want to have the conversation first, we can talk about that too. Should I go back to that one? Are we ready to go back? We'll come back to this one later too. Okay.
Emily, Ryan Daly, Operations Transition Team Manager. I just want to chime in real quick based on the conversation around what the Parks and Recreation Commission's focus has been. And though we are offering summer camps this year, the primary focus for phase one has really been that foundational element to determine what would be sort of the subsequent offerings. And so I think that that's a maybe something to think about, that there is that foundational element that needs to occur prior to discussing specific programmatic elements that may be implemented. So just wanted to put that out there, sort of what I had been hearing.
Okay, Ryan, can you define foundational, like just so you can give us a better idea of what specifically you're talking about?
Yeah, so I think one of the key things for us that we're building is an evaluation tool about the programs that we may be offering in the future. I believe Emily mentioned this earlier, that, you know, likely they could be the same, but there's a good chance that we're going to be offering quite a few things that are different and maybe not offering programs that we offered in the past. So we're creating evaluation tools for those programs to look at what we're going to offer in the future. So that's sort of what I mean by that foundation, is really actually taking a step back and looking at what is the Parks and Recreation Department going to be when we get to phase 3. So we're sort of up to that.
So is the Parks and Rec Commission pretty close to defining that? Because if they're going to City Council in April with this larger vision and plan, they're much further along than we are, right? Yes.
Yes.
So, Ryan, I'll jump in while you're catching your breath. Yeah.
The
So
second question is, are they going, Parks and Rec, going to the community and gathering specific, like having a specific event to gather community input to determine what that plan is for them? Is that what they're doing as well?
the Parks and Rec Commission
Or April?
had a survey in January and February, which provided some early feedback, some testing of some of the ideas that we thought we wanted to build out in the plan. So that community involvement has been sought. To explain foundational, again, it's not just program evaluation. We are spending time in that foundational phase, building a long list. The last Parks and Rec Commission meeting included an attachment in their packet that was 3 pages long of policies and procedures that the division needs to either revamp or newly add in order to support its activities in the future. And the foundational also means making sure that they're ready to roll with their scholarship program and bringing that up to date. That provides financial assistance to create more equity and inclusion in the community. It's making sure that they are building the staffing that is needed. That's a foundational piece. It's developing the cost accounting tools that they will need to do better reporting on performance. So it's a whole host of activities that we consider to be the support structure.
I have just one follow-up question. Is with that survey that went out, was it 1 survey or 2 surveys?
It was 1 survey.
How many responses did you guys get to that?
Over 550.
Okay.
Is that the survey we saw the results of, and was there art related questions in there, like music in the park and stuff like that, or was that a different survey?
That was a different survey. The results that you're talking about, Suzanne, were from the original 2020 PROS plan process, which was the strategic planning process we were kicking off at the beginning of 2020 that was suspended due to the pandemic.
So we probably need to refresh our knowledge of what we discovered in that survey. As we do, we can't do the foundational elements until we know what programs we want to offer. So we're not going to come up with evaluation tools, staff, until we know what programs we want to offer. But we'll keep it on the list there that once we do know what programs we want to come back with in each phase, then we will want to do those things, right?
Yeah,
So-
go ahead, Emily. Yeah, sorry.
I was just going to say, it may be helpful for us to send you a link to the packet, or maybe in the last couple of Parks and Recreation Commission packets, so you can see a couple of these resources that I've been talking about. The survey that was done for Parks and Recreation asked not for input on individual specific programs and activities. Instead, it asked kind of a higher level of question about who should be served by the activities of the division or at the community center, and how to make choices that inevitably the division is faced with. So I think you'll get a better sense from just seeing that survey tool, but those answers still enabled us to maybe make some decisions about, okay, it does look like there's good community support to enable private use of the facility in order to provide financial resources to support public activities in the building. So we were testing different assumptions like that. That will help us understand what programming to provide.
Their situation is much, much more complex than ours. And we probably need to focus on what we're trying to get done. I mean, I know we're already an hour into our meeting, or an hour and 6 minutes. So let's figure out how to move forward.
Sounds good to me.
One thing I will just say really quickly in response to, I think, both your comments, Suzanne and Aaron's, around engagement and feedback from the community specifically. I know that was something that we had talked about in the last workshop. You know, we want to engage the community, find out what they want, and we also want to strengthen our partnerships with other community organizations and individuals. And I think when when Emily and I met following that meeting, you know, in my mind, I think I really advocated for having the partnership meeting first, because, you know, there's strength in numbers. So if we can kind of rally some more groups around what the arts community needs, get them excited maybe about some of these ideas that you all are coming up with, then we have a stronger force to kind of go out to the community and engage them in the conversation. So I don't think that, to me, it's not that the community ask isn't there, it's just not there yet. I think that we need more kind of boots on the ground with us to have some of these conversations and identify some more of the needs of the overall community as they relate to arts and culture. So that was kind of the impetus for starting with kind of this partnership meeting, as opposed to.
I think it's great. I think that's what we discussed last time. I think it's great.
I agree with that, Sarah. And I guess when I'm looking at the bigger picture of all this, I'm concerned, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, do we have to be so attached to the Parks and Rec in our own timeline? And because it seems like we're behind, right? So
Yes.
Can we just, is it appropriate to separate and define our own timeline and set that so that we say in July or August, we definitely are going back to City Council with a more robust plan? Because I don't see us aligning with the Parks and Rec timeline.
Yeah,
And,
so Erin,
it kind of aligns with my idea to pull Arts Council under a different branch of the city, but we can talk about that later.
So Erin, I think the only pressure that I feel, Arts Council is behind where recreation is. The only pressure that I feel is to at least provide the City Council with a quick status update. You know, what have we been talking about? Where are we headed? That's all that I feel we need to accomplish in that April-May timeframe. And we can easily do that. We could do that today.
I agree. I just don't want us to like, okay, Parks and Rec is done with their process. They've gotten everything, and then have the Arts Council be forgotten in the process because we're behind.
Agreed. And yet it is important to realize that depending on what the Arts Council chooses to do, if there's a need for some resources or buy-in from the City Council in order to implement those ideas, you have to think about the amount of time it takes to get before the City Council, to get through the City Council, and then to have enough time to, after you get the green light, to go and implement, right? So we just want to make sure that everyone is thinking about that as well.
Okay, we have two hands up, and I don't know who was first. Was it Salim or Anameha?
Anameha was first.
Okay, thanks.
So this is a question for actually staff. Can we get access to any types of surveys that are done across, the different pillars? So it's not that, so that it helps us get perspective into like what our community is thinking overall, and we are not siloed in just thinking about arts. You know, it's good to see what's going on in the community mindset. So anytime surveys are done, results are published, it would be good to share it across all the councils and commissions. Thank you.
That's a great point. I think we can definitely explore that.
Salim.
Yeah.
You still have your hand up.
I wanted to make sure that we recognize the scale difference between arts and the Arts Council and
absolutely. We've talked about that, definitely. Like we don't have as much to plan as they do. That's for sure. I just don't want to get us like swept under.
No, I get that. And what I want to say to staff is, you have a structure, a skeleton, a framework that we want to put this process within that comes to an outcome in a similar way as Park and Rec. At least it seems that way to me. Is if we considered the size of budget that we're talking about with Arts Council and said maybe there's a skeleton light or a framework light or a process light that we could conform to that still respects the elements of what you want to do, but is a little bit less onerous, that gets us to programming or services maybe a little bit more quickly and gets in front of the council maybe one time instead of 2 times or 1.5 times. Our full budget was the cost of one program that was in Park and Rec. And I feel like we're being subjected to the same process as Park and Rec
That's,
I think this is entirely different process, quite frankly. I think we have scaled back, and we're doing something different with the Arts Council than we've done with Parks and Rec Commission. I'm happy to proceed however the Arts Council wishes to. I felt that last time we were getting some traction on where you wanted to go. And that last time we discussed, did you just want to, for example, pick one, a program or activity, or focus on identifying programs and activities that you want to provide in the future, and that this was the direction that the group wanted to go. But I'm happy to proceed however.
Well, that's fine. I mean, if they had the conversation and this is the path forward, I'm happy to stick with it. I think just from a council perspective, I would want to be at least cognizant of the cost of the process relative to the budget. That we didn't make the process cost more than the budget. Let's say that's a simple way of putting it. But that's fine.
Salim,
happy to do what the group wants to do.
I think that's the point you're making is something we brought up at the very first planning session that we had, and definitely acknowledged that. And I think the sticking point that we have now is that we're very conscious of needing or wanting to get some community input on where we go. I mean, we are the Arts Council for Mercer Island. We need to know what the community wants, and we haven't really gotten that in the terms of the pandemic. I mean, everything's changed, right? So we kind of need to know, we need a pulse check of where people are in the community to just help decide where we're going to go next. And the problem we're having now is that in order to even do that, we don't have we don't have staff. So it turns it into a two-step process in that, we have to go to city council to say, hey, we need some staff, because that's money. And then we can develop what we're going to define ourselves as from there. And that's what I'm worried about too, in that it just seems like it's going to take us a long time. That's my understanding of where we are. Is that right?
And I can respect that. I just know from having been on this working council for so long, this is a council that uses a very small budget to make programming, deliver services, so we'll call them, and fail fast if they don't work and not repeat them. And if they do work, repeat them and scale them up. And I think we saw that Music in the Park was a program that was growing. And, we tried some things. We were trying some things new. There was the fishing thing that we were going to do. That was the beer fest. That was new. And on the heels of probably a program that we tried that was less successful and decided not to renew. So I think that, we're not going to come up with a program necessarily that is going to last for 10 years with a big planning exercise by talking to the community and saying, what do you want? But we might come up with a framework of what the community likes, things that
you would advocate for, just let's us decide something for the community that we should provide based on what they've enjoyed in the past.
I mean, I just know that Music in the Park,
streamline the process.
There have been some things that are universally liked that the Arts Council has put on. I don't know, maybe that could be squeezed into a phase one, and we can talk about that as we move forward. Just getting some restorative programming to fire off a program this summer that we know would be successful.
I tend to agree. I think that we know from history what people want, and we could frame it in, we're going to restore that one program, the most successful program, and then we'll also would like resources and staff for I believe, Emily, at the last meeting, you said we can go to city council and say, this is a little bit undefined, but it's maybe a pandemic focused community project, or a percent for the arts project. It's something undefined, but it's going to be about this scale. Can we get, is that going to be too undefined for city council to say, this is sort of what we're looking for and we want this budget? What percentage of our budget historically has, it's like Salim says, it's so small anyways that, well, I don't know, it could be a problem. Okay, I see Suzanne and Salim also.
Well, I guess I would go, I really appreciate what Salim is saying. And I feel like our last 2 or 3 meetings have been, we've sort of struggled as a group. Maybe we're trying to, you know, be the Parks and Rec facilities reboot plan, which is, you know, dozens of staff and thousands of square feet of facility and insurance and on and on. I like the idea of just saying, I do like what we've presented so far tonight to check in with our arts community, and they are listening to the greater community. So let's, you know, it's just kind of this pyramid. So let's hear what they've been hearing. You know, I think that's a low cost way to gather a lot of information and build some momentum and get some volunteers and get some energy going. So I want to keep that component, but I think the next component is maybe, can we just say, we will do something, give us a quarter of give us whatever of our old budget we used to have, a quarter of it, a half of it, and let us evolve as these next few months come along. If we see that we can do a music in the park because the pandemic restrictions have limited, we could do that, or maybe it will be something else. But we'll bring something to the community. I think we have proven that we can do that. I feel like we're
Sorry
spending
to
hours
interrupt.
of consultant time and
Yeah.
and arts council meeting time. It's not. I don't know if that it's working that well.
Would it be a bad idea to just totally separate from my idea to take us away from Parks and Rec, but what % was our budget of the Parks and Rec budget before? Could we just have it be the same % as becomes agreed on next?
I can't speak for the whole council, but I can speak for myself. I don't think that we would fund one program based on a % of another like this. I know 1% for the art works that way against capital programs, but I don't think we would look at Park and Rec and say, you know, we'll
Like as
fund.
a yardstick, like, I mean, if Parks and Rec's budget gets cut by 50%, we're not gonna probably go in and get our 100% that we used to get, right?
I mean, I think we could do the phased approach that Emily's talking about, but all I'm suggesting is that within the first phase, we make a request to council for enough funding to do, I'm just going to throw out music in the park, because I know we can do it with very little staff time. It's mostly contract labor to do the programming. I know that we need to start it now if we're going to be successful for the summer. I know where it's going to be. It's going to be in Mercerdale, be outside, would be socially distanced. It could be successful, I think, given almost any constraint the government comes up with. And if it wasn't, you could just cancel it. Like it would not be the end of the world to cancel, cost-wise, planning-wise. It's just not that big a lift, but it does make some programming for the summer. And I thought we kind of started the process talking about this. And so I don't want this opportunity to go a whole year. And I'm not suggesting, Emily, that it would have gone a whole year, but it does sound like quite a bit of planning. And if we miss the planning cycle for music in the park, which is the next 2 months, pretty much, if we need to start having some real plans, concrete plans in June, that would be that.
And we
And I
know
think
we know what it costs. We don't have to
Yeah.
make it up. We know what it costs. We know what we've been spending on it for the last 5 years.
Yeah.
I do just want to chime in really quickly and just to the comment about, you know, limited staff time and everything. That is a resource that we really do need to consider. Obviously, a mostly music in the park, something, you know, this year would be at a much different scale that it had been in the last 30 years. But at the same time, you know, any kind of program like that is still staff intensive in some way. Coordinating contractors, making sure we can get, you know, the sound equipment and everything like that. At most you could, I won't even say that. I would just say that, you know, keep in mind as volunteers, as the Arts Council, you would likely be asked to step up more or help us recruit others, which is where this kind of partnership idea could come in and be helpful. But we would we would need bodies, you know, on the ground and everything,
There was also
before,
the
after, and during, yeah.
Salim had to contract out. I mean,
Yeah,
if
one
you
of the
really
things
wanted to do music
we
in the
did,
park.
we did suggest that early on, that we would ramp up all the costs to structure in the overhead. So that, for example, we hire a manager of music in the park and pay that person, I don't know, $500 a performance to just do all of the things that you just suggested. I know they can't take the contract to the city attorney and have that done, but they could probably do all the other management of the project. I think we just build that into the budget, if that's, knowing that that's a constraint.
And Sarah, you probably know how much that takes. I mean, advertising, getting the word out, garbage pickup, all the things that have to happen. We'd have to, I mean, that would be probably your staff time, is to identify all the jobs that need to be done and how much time it takes. And whether that, maybe a summer intern, maybe it's a high school kid that we hire, but maybe it's a college kid or a contractor.
Yeah, I agree that there are definitely ways to do it. I just didn't want it to go unsaid that there still is a city staff impact on managing any kind of contractor or volunteer or anything like that. So we would, as you're planning, you would have to factor in how, if it is the staff time, to pencil all of that out and make sure that it is, boxed up and ready to go as much as possible, because we're paying for it. That's great. But I just wanted to make sure that that didn't go unsaid.
And Sarah, would it be possible or more manageable? I don't know how many weeks of music in the park we did in the past, but I mean, I wouldn't think we would be looking at a full schedule. If we just did 2 or 3 events, or every other week or something, it seems like more reasonable start.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, to me, it all just depends on kind of what the COVID related impacts are at that time. But, I think definitely you would have to scale back to some degree. I think in the past, producing 6 concerts, we started planning that in October, November. So the year before. So I think that there's definitely a scale down that would have to happen, given that it's the middle of March already.
Yeah, this is just a question. Like, could we actually do that now? I mean, are we anticipating in the summer that our order or whatever, could gather that many people together? I don't even know what our order is right now. Are we allowed to do something like that right now?
The order allows some special events to occur with restrictions up to 200 people. But there are other restrictions that are in place. I think it's important, as we said in an earlier meeting, to understand that there are likely to be city council members that have a difference of an opinion about when it would be right for the city to hold a large gathering, even outdoors. And that's why early on we talked about making sure you have some alternatives ready to go. We also spoke about the fact that many communities around us have canceled their large summer events, some through the 4th of July, some beyond. So I want to make sure that you all have that context. We spoke earlier too about just gearing up for the biggest events that you might want to hold for some time after we're certain that those pandemic restrictions have been lifted. So just a couple more things for you to think about.
No, I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. I see Anameha and Galen have both had their hands up, and somebody else had a hand, but it's gone. I don't know who was first. Galen, do you want to go ahead?
I just had a quick question in terms of staff time and other costs associated with, let's say we wanted to do, 2 or 3 musics in the park or 2 musics in the park. And we know that there's some risk, but we also know it's an outdoor event. We could required that it be family groups that were together, separating between family groups. I mean, there could be some way to deal with whatever restrictions are in place at the point. So let's say it's a possibility. Aren't there budgets from past, like budgets and timelines and materials from past events that we could look at so we could try to make this more tangible?
There are project budgets that kind of outline the operating expenses related to sound engineers and bands and advertising and all of that. But, we don't necessarily have, this is probably a policy process thing on our end that we should have had, but we don't necessarily have it line itemed out in terms of staff. So we would need to go in and, look at all of that time that was put into mostly Music in the Park 2019 and all of the various departments. There were a variety of things down to like our parks crew making sure that the sprinklers are turned off in Mercerdale Park every week so they don't go off during a concert and those kinds of things. So it would take a little time to compile all that information in a kind of neat and orderly way that outlines what a complete project budget would have been for mostly Music in the Park pre-COVID, and to give you a sense of everything that would have gone into all of that.
So how was your time allocated before? There wasn't a, X% approximately for this type of event or this, there must have been some sort of concept of what staff time was involved in these events.
To be honest, my staff time when I was your full-time arts and culture coordinator wasn't organized that way. I
think before you though, Sarah, it wasn't it? The position before we had a full-time arts coordinator had a certain percentage that they dedicated to summer celebration, and I see Ryan not.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. Ryan Daly, Operations Transition Team Manager. The way our time is sort of allocated for generally for coordinator level staff and even some supervisory staff is by percentage to a given budget code. So summer celebration, for example, had its own. So that was 25% of the previous person's time. Sarah, when she was in her previous position with the Arts Council, I believe it was 100% of the time to special projects, which was a category within Arts Council. So that's sort of how it was broken up. It wasn't broken up necessarily to specific events unless they were in separate budget codes.
Anumeha, do you still have a question or a comment?
Yes, I do. It clearly looks like we are all very passionate and we have ideas on how to utilize our energy and serve the community, but I think we are digressing quite a lot from our main agenda. I appreciate and understand what has been the history with the Arts Council and the city in general, but I think all of us recognize that these are unprecedented times, so we need to be nimble and just move forward like with a plan. I read the material, it looks good to me. So I think unless we have like some specific clarifying questions, like what does 46 total staff time mean? Or, what goes into it? We should proceed with reviewing the material, get to a plan. Otherwise, we will never be able to plan anything for 2021 and 2022.
Okay, back to me. Thank you. No, I agree. We definitely need to shore some things up, but I think this conversation is very valuable and that it's really highlighting an important piece that that seems like there's quite an agreement on bringing at least one past successful program back into the mix. And I think that's important that that's being defined. So maybe that's something that we can just throw into our first plan and nail down, maybe not for this summer, but we will definitely do it next summer, something like that.
Okay, I'm gonna assume, but Madam Chair, please.
What else did you have to say, Emily? Do you have more slides for us?
There are more slides.
Okay. Moving on.
I would love it, since time is of the essence in that if you want to have this particular conversation that we have on screen, we get moving on it. Because I think I heard from several of you that you don't want to wait until the pandemic is absolutely in the rearview mirror to have this conversation, for example. So I'm gonna
Can
add.
we move on with the full presentation and then maybe come back to decide, well, we will do that. Like, do we have to decide now? I'm so curious what's on the next slides that I don't want to make a decision on this right now.
Happy to do that. Okay, so the second item was policy development and updating. We also heard from the group last time that there was a desire to put some of your time and energy into this realm for the remainder of 2021, probably beyond, but to carve out some of the agenda time to do some of this work. And so this doesn't have a whole lot of specificity to it. It was meant to be big and broad, and we can refine it. I don't know that City Council, for example, needs a lot more detail on this front. Should you include this in your status update to them? But the action would be to identify those policies that need some attention, and then to start work on that. Purpose is to enhance the Arts Council's ability to perform its essential functions and to manage the municipality's assets. So some of the things that you had talked about was improving some of the policies and practices around the 1% fund, or taking another look at the city's comp plan and the arts chapter. Those are just two examples that I heard last time. So timely would be start working on that right away. Develop a plan to maybe tackle things one at a time and get your highest priorities done early on. So are there any questions or feedback on this one? Or should we go on to number 3? 3, okay. All right, so the last one was taking a longer view and really starting to think about, okay, beyond the most immediate things that we can get going on right away, what do we need to start to think about that's going to take longer time to plan, or more community input than we have today, or another discussion about priorities, for example. And then to really think about how to design that full portfolio of programs and actions of the Arts Council. And so this last one was really big and broad too. It's just continue that discussion on your priorities, do some needs evaluation. You spoke about that last time too. Evaluate what you need in terms of resources. And even there was conversation last time about how do you then begin building a plan to secure the resources that are needed to do the things that you want to do. Eric talked about that, for example, and develop an approach to carrying out those priorities. Get real good clarity on what you're trying to pursue, why you're pursuing it, and what you need to get it done. And so we could start that work right away too. And we were suggesting that perhaps that community engagement, that listening event that you had talked about, might also be one of the inputs for this. It may help you to get some clarity on those priorities, and that continue this work through the end of 2021, if that's the timeline that you wish to pursue. And that might just help you to then have a better foundation and give some shape to any of the programs and services you want to tackle in 2022. So those are the 3. Madam Chair, how would you suggest to proceed? You want to go back to number 1?
I think so. Can I just ask a question about this slide?
Yeah.
staff time, 5 Arts Council meetings. What is that anticipating?
Sure. So Sarah will jump in here, and I'll just say I tried to force Sarah to try to quantify some of these. These are just back of the napkin sort of assessments, but we did want you to kind of understand maybe what level of commitment was going to be needed in order to get these things done. So Sarah.
Yeah, so just kind of some of the assumptions I used in trying to quantify staff and volunteer hours in each of these slides. I assumed that we would continue working on this work in regular Arts Council meetings through the end of the year. I also assumed that I would be able to apply maybe 10 to 15% of my work time to this work. And then I also assumed that there would likely be some hours outside of meetings, regular Arts Council meetings, where we might need to do ad hoc kind of subcommittee or something like that. And for that type of work, I estimated like 1/3 of my time equates total Arts Council time. So when you look at this, like the 180 total hours for Arts Council time, that includes your meetings, your regular meetings that you're already in, maybe some additional workshops or meetings outside of it for something like this, as well as maybe, but this is total through the end of the year.
Okay.
Correct. So it's,
this isn't like a going forward long-term plan. This is just
no, this is to implement these 3 action items through the end of 2021. This is the amount of total time I anticipate it will take from staff, just me. I'm not using, an additional staff person or anything like that. My staff time and total Arts Council time. So.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay.
All right. I think that I would love to get input from everyone on the total plan. I mean, I think that this represents what we talked about at the last meeting very well. So I'm curious to know why that first slide got us so stuck up on maybe we don't actually want to have the community listening, or do we want it to look different? But yeah, I'd like to hear from everyone else how they're feeling. And I would just love to like define a little more specifically if this plan veers from Parks and Rec when we go back to City Council for a larger ask.
I have 2 quick questions. One is, I'm assuming that the slide deck's going to be shared with us because it has information in it that was not in the attachment to the agenda, like these time estimates.
Correct.
Okay. So I guess my one hesitation on number 1 is whether there is a way that number 1 can include some sort of commitment to at least try to do something, not just planning and policy developing with our time, like whether we could commit in some way to try to have one of those things be an event.
I agree. I think that that's the piece that we all seem to be wanting to do. We've wanted to do something. And while I think it's valuable to take that time to get the community input, like I had suggested in our last meetings, we're all out there gathering the pulse of the community in our own ways, right? And our job is to interpret that and how we can serve that as the Arts Council. At least that's my understanding. Suzanne?
So this last slide is just basically looking to what we're going to do in 2022. Is that right? Or 2020, past 2021. So 2022, 2023, or, the long term. It doesn't,
Correct.
to Galen's point, none of these bring anything to the community, any art event, any art interaction, none of. So, I mean, I'm fine with that. I do like the reaching out to the arts community, but to Galen's point, it might be worthwhile to, and actually Salim's point as well. This is great. I think you guys did a great job at defining this, and it is where we are, as Anime has said, but could we plan that one music in the park, knowing that we might have to cancel it?
Anna Meha has.
Yeah, I do have comment actually on Suzanne's point. I think from what I'm understanding with the series of meetings that we have been having so far is to start with a plan, and to plan an event for 2021 is an outcome of this process. So the fact that we are starting with the plan doesn't mean that we'll just work on planning throughout the year. My understanding is comes April, and then we already are prepared to see what can be done in 2021, unless like I'm mistaken. I think the brainstorming of scheduling events in 2021 is not this meeting, but like in a separate meeting. And that doesn't mean that we are just signing up for not doing events at all today, unless I'm mistaken, Sarah or Emily, you think so? But at least I didn't take it that way. From me, it is, yes, we agree to this. Now let's just go and brainstorm in a different meeting on what can be done in 2021.
I'm going to let Salim jump in first, and then.
Yeah, I'm glad that you made that point, because that raised my issues coming from a council perspective. The council meets twice a month. We're not going to be looking or talking about appropriations till at least April. Then we would need to make the appropriations. They need to flow back to the Arts Council, who would then begin the process of planning. But there's not going to be any planning without any money. And so the cart or the horse, right, which is going to come first? I think that if Parks and Rec has an immediate action plan that has some funding component, which we know that it does, and that what they've funded is the summer rec activities that they know are popular and have a revenue generating capacity, I think that we could make a similar move right now, and we could say, look, here is our skeleton of an idea. We're proposing spending some money on some number of events in the park that could pivot to some number of events not in the park if the pandemic didn't work for that, or something else, something small scale. But if we don't have any funding in there, we're not going to have any meetings to talk about how we might accomplish those things in 2021. And I just know from experience that we have two problems with the Arts Council. Number one is this is a working council of mostly artists that are here because of their love of the arts. If we don't do any arts, we won't have any council. I promise you. We already have a recruitment problem. I think we have an open seat on the Arts Council. We have people that can make it, can't make it, have, interest that is greater at some times and less at other times. We have to keep the interest there, and that means we have to put some programming together. I would just implore the Arts Council to, at least in this immediate action plan, have a small preliminary budget ask so that we can do some sort of service, some programming. And I'll just leave it at that and let you guys talk how you want to move forward. I mean, I think this is a great plan, but in the famous words of Debbie Bertlin, our former mayor, this to me feels like a yes and. We can do this, yes, and maybe $20,000, $30,000 worth of programming or services in 2021.
Thank you, Salim. I think that's very good feedback. So what do we want to do, guys?
I think unless we make a request to do an event and have some sort of idea of what kind of money we're looking at, it's not going to be there. We're going to spend the whole time doing, policy and discussions and input, and nothing tangible that really gives something to our community that's tangible, or, create some sort of excitement and event to bring the community together.
Yeah, and I think, since you're the chair, Erin, I would say, like, you can lead us into this. You can prioritize and say, guys, for next meeting, or let's have intermediate meetings and come up with these top 3 things which cater to our community. We need to have events. We need to come up with like some sort of a budget to give it to the council. members, right? You feel free to drive it and use our energy the way you want. Because this plan really is basically just giving us a framework, and we have a lot of wiggle room in what we want to do. And obviously we all want to do something this year, so maybe that's the highest priority.
So are you proposing creating a subcommittee to start planning an event?
That is one proposal, yes, it could be. But I also want to make sure like we are giving back to the council members what we have been asked of, which Emily is driving with Sarah. So we want to make sure that we give that too. And I really appreciate that discussion about keeping us separate from Parks and Rec so that we don't just get dropped off.
May I ask Emily then?
Yeah.
Again, so what I'm kind of hearing that we like the steps 1, 2, 3, the community collaboration, the policy development, the long-term phased approach. But I just want to be crystal clear on the long-term, the slide that's up right now, that is looking at programming after this year. So then it sounds like the only thing that we need to add is pre all of this is that commitment to do something now and ask for that budget, whatever that something is that we're going to be able to, part of the work is defining what we can do. And I do remember when we first started this, that, we were given the directive from Jesse Bond that we were not going to be allowed to plan any in-person events. So that's kind of how we ended up down this path. I was thinking about that. There was like not any ifs, ands, or buts. And I don't know how you feel about this, Celine, but that is how we were told from the beginning, that you shall not plan any in-person events. And so now we're kind of flipping on that. I'm hoping that we're feeling that that's the right decision.
Let me just respond. We can be flexible and we can do what the health and safety guidelines will allow us to do, but we can't do it without any budget. So for instance, there is a club on the island that wants to do a car parade every year, right? They want to do it with Mercerversary. They have a car show. There are ways to do things without creating a gathering that could still be around the arts. But again, we would need to have some budget for it. And unless we ask for 10 grand, 15 grand, 20 grand, there will be no planning. So I think we could be flexible.
Sorry, what I'm hearing is we just need to ask for some money for a event. It doesn't have to be defined yet, particularly what it is. Is that right? Can we do that? Can we come to city council and say, hey, we want to do something like music in the park, whatever will fit with our current regulations, that cost X amount of dollars. We want to provide the community with that, and that's our ask.
We know we've done music in the park with kids programming emphasis. It's hard to say that we couldn't do something that was kid focused and keep it below 200. I think we could easily do that. We've done it before. I know that we could do things that were socially distant that didn't involve a gathering, like a car parade with live music that people drove past. I mean, there are ways to do it, but it just requires planning, and we don't know what the regulations are going to be come summertime, but we can hope for the best and plan for the worst, but not without money.
So I think it's a question to Sarah. So what are we intending in this meeting then? Because looks to me we do need a subcommittee to be able to answer Salim's questions and come up with answers, right?
We may be able to just ask, the chair may be able to ask staff to ask city manager if staff could come back with some numbers. Sarah said that with some level of putting things together, she might be able to come up with some order of magnitude for different events. I don't think we need a lot of event options and exhaustive numbers, but we need some scale. And then if we went to the city council with something that we wrote ourselves as an arts council, maybe as a subcommittee, we write the proposal just based on the limited data that Sarah provides. I think then that's enough to ask for a small appropriation.
Makes sense.
I don't know, Sarah, because I haven't really been, had this experience before, but what does it take to get staff, for the Arts Council to have staff do something when Arts Council has no staff?
I I think in this situation, what I think I would prefer to do is, take all of this that Emily, Ryan, and I are hearing from the group, and we already have kind of a post-mortem on the calendar for tomorrow, and just kind of determine, how best to approach it. I don't think we need a directive from the chair per se. I think that we've heard overwhelmingly that there's strong interest in doing some sort of organized event, whether it's similar to a past popular event like Mostly Music in the Park, or something new that better aligns with the health guidelines. And I do agree that we need to have a conversation among our team and with the city manager on kind of, where the flavor is for that. I guess one thing I will say is, I guess I'm a little confused because, in order to, so Salim, are you saying that you feel your colleagues on council will be open to kind of a framework for an event? So if we say we want to do something in a park that involves the arts, it will kind of adhere to these guidelines. You think that that's enough to ask for money? Because I do still sort of feel like we're putting the cart before the horse by
That's the
taking
question.
a really, really sort of undrawn ask to council. And I think if there are limited opportunities for the Arts Council to get in front of you all this year, I would like for the group to, be as set up for success as possible. So yeah, just looking for more guidance on that from you as well.
Well, I think the council got pretty speculative funding the rec programs over the summer. I mean, we said we were going to fire them up because we understood the intrinsic value of having them. They're all being done through contractors. And so the city is not bringing staff in to have that startup. We're effectively talking about the same thing, right? These are valuable arts programs. We're not talking about creating something that's net new. And we're not talking about staff having to sponsor and implement it. We're talking about doing it through contractors. So I think it's just a scale issue. We're going to do it at a scale that's much smaller. And if we're not allowed to do it, we won't do it. So you would just end up with a budget that is appropriated but not spent, surplus, I guess.
Okay. So if the rest of the Arts Council feels comfortable, I think what I would like to do is kind of take all of this feedback, reconnect with Emily offline about kind of next steps for the immediate action plan. But we would like to, knowing that your next Arts Council meeting isn't until April 14th, we do need to try to put an interim meeting on the calendar to get some of these things more ironed out in order to, align with some of those other city council and Parks and Rec Commission kind of frontages. So I know that the Mercer Island spring break is the first week in April, and we talked about that sort of being off. So just wondering if something perhaps the week of either March 22nd or March 29th would work. Perhaps, we've done Tuesday meetings a couple of times. Would Tuesday, March 23rd in the evening work for a check-in? Erin's shaking her head no. Okay.
Could we do Wednesday? Because Wednesdays are open mostly, unless like other folks are not available.
I can't do that week,
Okay.
unfortunately.
Okay. Emily, from your perspective, do you think the week of March 29th is too late to come back in between meetings?
I think the Arts Council can come back with their status update and their request anytime. As we've discussed, just the later that is, the harder it's going to be to implement something in 2021. So earlier is better, but I don't think there's a hard fast date that we have to hit. We'll back into any council, packet deadline that we need to.
Okay.
Emily, what was the date, the joint council, Park Rec and council? What was the date?
April 20th.
April 20th.
And when did you ideally want to give an update from the Arts Council to the City Council?
Within that same packet, we weren't planning to present anything, but we thought we'd have a couple paragraph or so in the staff memo, just to say, hey, and by the way, on the art side, here's where we're at.
Maybe Sarah, it's best to have your debrief tomorrow and see what you could do in terms of putting together some numbers. And if you emailed that out to the chair and to myself, maybe we could talk as a planning committee to try and bring something back to the Arts Council and see if we need a special meeting or if this is just something that could be done quickly at the next Arts Council meeting prior to the 420 meeting. I also need to
clarify from Emily that the addendum, the couple paragraphs that you suggested we put into the Parks and Rec plan that goes to City Council, that did not originally consider any sort of budget ask, right?
That's correct, but I think Salim's suggestion is a good one, that if there can be enough detail, enough clarity about what sort of resource ask is desired, then you all could act on that, bless that proposal at your April meeting, and then either we couple it with a resource ask. It's a special meeting, so council wouldn't really act on that. Correct me if I'm wrong, Salim, probably until the first meeting in May.
That's probably right. And I need to go back to the council planning calendar. I know that there's a carryover discussion from the 12/31/20 financials to dispose of them. And that's happening in April, but I'm not sure which meeting it was at. So I think there's enough unknowns here that if we just start with step one of trying to construct some numbers, have a debrief tomorrow, and then Aaron and I talk, maybe we could have something back to the Arts Council for them to decide and see how it sequences with the rest of things.
That makes sense.
Baby steps.
Sounds like a good plan. Also, while we're all here, though, I do want to go back to that first slide and get an understanding from the Arts Council if we still want to do some sort of community gathering event, what was it called? Community feedback event. Are we starting to stray away from needing to do that since we're planning a separate event that might be some sort of music in the park? Or are we thinking of doing two things?
I think they're separate, and I am very interested in gathering this information from the arts community to help feed into our long-term plan.
So can we identify that more like as needing a little bit less resources? No, you think that that's going to be a big 50-hour of
It doesn't look like
100 hours of planning time event to pull that off?
And I feel like we already have done some of that and we're doing more of a update.
It doesn't seem like it would require 52 hours total for if we're doing this listening opportunity as a community engagement.
And just to define, this is an online, like a Zoom, correct?
I think that's what we assumed.
Yes.
Be virtual, yeah.
If it's happening soon.
I'm just thinking we could scale some of those numbers down. Maybe.
So I think then what I
It
would.
sounds like thumbs up, everyone wants to do it. Yes. Just like, yes. Okay.
Maybe also some clarity on the numbers. You know, tonight we have, what is it, 5 Arts Council members, 2 staff, So you got 7 people, 2 hours, it's 14 hours. I think that's the way these hours are being calculated. So when it says 52 hours, it's not like some
Per person. Yeah, it's collective.
right? So that's a 6-hour meeting, not a 52-hour meeting. Or 52 hours of meeting.
No, I think that 6 hours sounds like a really long, like that sounds like a lot for.
That would be that. So again,
Each
and
member
I'm
to devote
sorry
6
for any confusion, but this is operating on the assumption that we would spend time in April and May planning or facilitating, and then in June evaluating. So that's the meeting time. It's not one 6-hour long meeting. But again, this was just kind of a rough estimate to let you all know what it may take to pull something like this off. We can scale it back. We just need to identify how and when we would do that.
Well, it sounds like everyone wants to do it, so we might as well just put that in there with the plan if, you know, we're asking for those resources.
I have a question for Sarah. Is I have never, based on when I came on the Arts Council, I've never participated really in Music in the Park or Shakespeare in the Park, some of these planning of and implementation of these events. But is it possible to maybe give some Arts Council people that are willing, like one assignment? Like if you said, last year, this band was the most popular band. Hey, Suzanne, will you call them and see if they're available in August, what the cost would be? What kinds of services? Would they bring their own sound crew? Would they bring their own cleanup crew? Would they, you know, so maybe if you have 2 or 3 of these events, maybe, or musical groups or whatever you want to call them, maybe you can assign, I don't want to do 3 of them, but I'd be happy to do 1 of them. And if a couple other Arts Council people, it may be that we're planning something that's, maybe we're already too late, but we definitely have to get some lead time. If we're not going to have this decision made and for a couple of months as to whether or not we have the budget, we need to find out if we're trying to buy something that's actually available to us.
Suzanne, have you not been on the Arts Council and when we've done Music in the Park? Is that true?
I've been
It's been like it's like a year-long planning process. There's usually
I don't, but I didn't have my hands in there getting dirty, you know.
a call to artists that happens well before now, and the committee has these submissions, and I think in the past 2 years we've brought in outside volunteers that review all the band submissions. But yeah, I mean, that is a little concerning. I don't think that we could do it on the scale we've done it in the past. If we're talking about like a couple of concerts, I think we can streamline it pretty easily. We don't have to go through that process that we've done in the past.
Yeah, I don't think we're looking at anything like you've done in the past. I'm just wondering if we can identify 2 or 3 musical acts that are available in August. That's my only question. Are they available? What is your basic cost? What does it take to support one of those events?
Yeah, and I think we're kind of asked, there's multiple asks for kind of the same thing, like really just telling at what scale how these things can happen and in what, you know, I will say it would require likely more volunteer commitment from the Arts Council or other volunteers. So I hope that, you know, as we're generating these ideas, you all are willing to help really pull them off and everything. So but yeah, I think you're kind of asking similar questions, just trying to understand at this scale, what does it look like? What do we need at this scale? What would it look like? What do we need, kind of thing?
I think though, for the Music in the Park, Salim and I, we're going to talk and then get back to the Arts Council on whether it's even a possibility. Okay, I think we should move on. Yeah, all right. Did we need to make a decision on this?
I think we have clarity. We're gonna do, so just to repeat, we're gonna do staff huddle consultant huddle tomorrow. Think about what additional information we need to share, particularly with Aaron and Salim. And then Aaron and Salim are gonna connect and ultimately hope to have some sort of outline of possibilities, proposals that the group could consider at its next meeting in April. And we'll see where we go from there, but possibly that shapes up into an ask to City Council. So status update and an ask to City Council. In addition, I think we had good clarity from the group that all three of the ideas, the buckets that were presented tonight, are things that you want to continue to work on. And so we'll continue to give a little bit more shape to that and be poised and ready to include that as part of the status update to the City Council.
And then was there consensus, or do we need to do a thumbs up, thumbs down on Susie Scone's idea on this first bullet here? She had to edit to the sentence about just ended at artists.
Yeah, removing the pandemic related language.
I mean,
Okay.
I've
Remember,
noted it. I'm happy to modify that.
I say thumbs up. Let's just clean that language up. Anyone else? Thumbs up. I see 1, 2,
I
3.
could vote. I'd say that's
Okay.
an improvement.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, Emily. All right. Thank you, everybody. So shall we quickly move on to our next agenda item, Sarah,
Yeah.
about city projects?
Yeah. So I just wanted to give a really quick update on some of the art and public art related conversations we've been having over the past few months as they pertain to city projects. So first, on February 24th, the Design Commission approved the Xinghua development, and it included reciting Fireflower in kind of the mock-up location that we had shown, Eric and I had shown on February 23rd. He and I are working on reconnecting with the developer team now to start talking about terms of citing that piece there, including having the developer pay for the repairs and creating like a very specific installation, landscaping and everything in that space. So we're moving that along. I will say from some design commissioners I've talked with and just other public who have heard about this element of the design in particular, they're very excited about it. So I know that there was maybe some hesitation at the last meeting in going down this route, but I do think that it will be a great opportunity for the community and really give more life to that piece. Additionally, last week at the Parks and Rec Commission meeting, the Parks and Rec Commission reviewed a draft of the preferred concept plan for the Luther Burbank Docks project, and I received a couple questions about that based on some of the information that was in the packet. So I just wanted to clarify with you all, Handsome Bollards is installed down at the plaza at the docks, and as part of the preferred concept, they're talking about the possibility of integrating that piece into kind of a renovation of the plaza, maybe creating some steps down into the water or something like that. I talked with Paul West a few weeks ago about when we're bringing this to the Arts Council, and it will be during the 30% design, which is when in the process we would start talking about something like that. So we can anticipate that probably in July, Paul and maybe representatives from the Parks and Rec Commission would come and have a conversation about that installation with the Arts Council. Helpful to note that the timeline for that project, and Ryan can chime in on this if he wants to as well. I think implementation of the design and redesign, reconfiguration of the plan or the docks likely won't happen until 2024 at the earliest. So I just want to let you all know that Arts Council is still on Paul West's mind, who's in charge of that project, and he's on top of kind of connecting with us to make sure that Arts Council is involved at various points. There was also a question about reaction to design elements in the process. And I just wanted to clarify that within this kind of design and concept, decorative elements. Yeah, thanks, Erin. Within this plan, decorative elements meant like flags and banners and things like planters installed around the plaza area. So the subcommittee, in working with the consultants and Paul, and what they presented back to the full board last week, is that really wanting to maintain kind of the natural character of the space, and thinking that something like very loud banners and flags might convey sort of a carnival atmosphere or something like that. So just to note, because I'd had some questions about whether decorative elements meant public art. It doesn't in this case. So just know that there's still both with handsome bollards and potential 1% elements with that overall project, there's still a lot of opportunity to get involved and talk about it. So I just wanted to share that with you all. And then finally, just kind of following up on a couple of things that we talked about a few meetings ago. So I connected with Larry Mclaughlin, who is an artist who has pieces on view in the outdoor gallery. One of his pieces fell over during the windstorm we had last month. And so I talked finally with Larry last week. We are going to remove the piece that tipped over and store it in the same location that we have other works of art stored right now. And Larry will be here in May to kind of meet on site at a safe social distance and talk about kind of, where we go with the works of art that he has currently installed at the gallery. So I'll keep you all posted on that. I think it would be a good opportunity for 1 or 2 Arts Council members to join as well. Additionally, on March 23rd and 24th, we're doing a condition report of all 3D works in the public art collection, or 3D works that are installed outdoors with ArtSite. And mentioned that this was sort of prompted by the recent theft of the sculpture Counterpoint, just to ensure that we have all of the updated information, kind of just general tombstone for our public art records. So this will include things like ensuring that we have correct information about media, size, dimensions, locations, as well as doing kind of a condition report to assess any damage and priority maintenance needs. So I'll keep you all posted on that and give an update at the April meeting. And then finally, I just, maybe I don't want to stoke the action plan fires too much with this one, but I have received some inquiries about people interested in partnerships to create art in the public realm projects on the island. So not necessarily what we call public art, which is essentially acquiring a piece or commissioning a piece for the city's public art collection, but creating temporary works of art and installations in public areas that people can engage with. So I'm keeping these projects warm right now. I'm keeping them on the radar, and I think I'll probably loop Amy and Eric in on these various projects. Just know that these kinds of things are coming in. I think that we probably still need to do a little more work on the planning front, but I do think that there are opportunities on the horizon. There are a lot of people, both local artists, regional and national, international artists, who are really interested in kind of bringing projects to this region and re-inspiring people with art. So I am keeping it top of mind, and I will report back as needed. Yeah, Salim.
I just want to make sure that we don't not have this discussion, but we have the gallery at the community center. I know the community center is closed, and we need to be at least kept in the loop as a council as to what the facility plans end up being. I know that they're fluid, so that we can at least plan for the standing back up of that program, because I think once the facility is open at some percentage, then we should reactivate that. And I think it fits in nicely with the early start programs that talk about if we can refire a service that also pays for itself, which that one clearly did, that would be a priority. So let's just I know Ryan's nodding his head, make sure that we have some placeholder for that.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And I don't know if that takes any money to restart. You know, if it's built into the facilities and the overhead of the facility.
Supposed to make money.
I know it makes money, but the question I would just briefly pose is, do we have to budget anything for that to restart it? Or would it just intrinsically be built into the facility firing up?
I think it would require a lot of staff time and volunteer time, right, Sarah?
Well, the volunteer time, I think we can handle because we've done that in the past, but I don't know if we need any budget for, you'll have to just think about that and come back to us.
Mhm.
I'll just chime in really quick. There would be some coordination time. I would lean on Sarah to share that, but in our plans to reopen the facility, which our anticipation is obviously with summer camps in late June, early July, that's when the doors will open, so to speak. And so I would say that kind of brings on that opportunity as well. So very good point. That's what we're talking about as well.
Did our panels get completed and is everything back ready to go?
Mhm.
Looks
Yeah.
like brand new in there. We
were able to mount one exhibit in 2020, and then it came down right when we had to shut everything down. So.
Oh boy. All right. Well, at least we know it works.
Sarah, I have a quick question.
I have a question too.
Well, can we let Gayleen go because she has had her hand up for a while? Yeah, thanks.
When you do that condition report, is there a chance to include in that some sort of mini assessment on lighting and security for each of the pieces? Is that something we've been talking about?
Yeah, I think like overall kind of environmental assessment has been included, but I will ask them to also look at lighting and security specifically. That's great.
Thank you.
Yeah. Erin, do you have another question?
Oh, God, I keep thinking that I mute myself, but I was not muted. Sorry. Yes, I have a question about Fire Flower. And I just, I was probably one of the more hesitant ones, but I think since we were doing it, we should make it a real celebratory opportunity for the community and play up the fact that this piece is a fire flower, like from ash, like the rebirth of it, that's what the art symbolizes anyways. So we can play off of that, and also to explore maybe doing another time capsule since the previous one disappeared. I think that might be a nice, fun community project that people would back, especially considering the times we're in and the circumstances. We can throw some toilet paper and masks and hand sanitizer in there. I want to make it something to create a positive experience for the community. And I think that there's some good framework to do that.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Comment on that. And then also just questions about like who's going to be drafting the terms with them, and how can we draft some terms that might avoid problems in the future, considering it's public art on a private development.
So that very early in the stages of that's something in which we would engage our city attorney's office, to pull all of that together. So it definitely will be something that's beneficial to the city, knowing that it's part of the public art collection.
And then you noted that the developer is going to be paying for the repair costs. How does that play in with insurance? Was that insurance going to pay for the repairs?
So the way the claim works for that piece, we would have to get it repaired within the year. So I think the piece was damaged back in November. And so basically we can keep it open as long as we get the repairs within a year. And then I think we have to do something else with the claim. I need to get clarification on that. I think the reason I haven't necessarily pursued repairs right away is because I was waiting on figuring out where we were going to recite it. So now that we have a plan, I mean, obviously that would go in after, near the end of completion of a development. So the timing on that is still unknown right now. But yeah, part of this kind of stipulation was to ask them to pay for the repairs. So we still need to have all of those conversations now that it's been preliminarily approved, but
So
I'll
we'd want to
definitely
get that,
keep you all posted.
we would want to get that agreement in place before the time period expires for insurance, right? Okay. Those are my questions.
Okay. That is all I have on public art, unless anyone has any other questions. Okay, thank you.
Sarah, could I chime in one last time? March 23rd, we'll be having a virtual open house or virtual public meeting for the pros plan. So that's starting to ramp back up. So you'll be getting information very soon on that. Would be great to have any Arts Council members who can participate, be present, listen to the meeting and whatnot. It's that process, like I said, is really starting to kick back into gear as we move through the next couple of months. And then I would imagine myself or City Manager Bond coming into the Arts Council and giving an update sometime after that virtual public meeting. So just wanted to chime that in there. Take every opportunity I can.
Thanks, Ryan.
Oops.
All right. Any questions, comments? So I think our last bit of business is to talk about officer elections, because I am wearing out my welcome with this extension. So we need to decide as a group. We had originally extended the chair position to April. So we're supposed to have a vote on that in April. And I guess we just want to get a pulse on the board if that's what we still want to do, hold elections in April.
Versus just extending you indefinitely.
Oh,
I
no.
like that plan.
I mean, it is highlighted on those notes that
No,
there's
I think
a possibility of extending the positions again. But
yeah, originally when we extended them, you all discussed whether you would do it for 3 months or 6 months, and ultimately landed on 3 months and holding elections again in April. So I think knowing that next month is April, and I just want to make sure that we get you all the right information in preparation for doing elections in April, or if you want to postpone again, given the unprecedented times we're in. Just wanted to hear from you all your thoughts.
I'm happy to open the position up to somebody who would like to take a stab at leading meetings, etc. Yeah.
Oh, you're on mute, Suzanne.
I thought if I pushed my space bar, I wouldn't be on mute, but anyway, am I on? Okay. I think we need Amy here, and we need the willingness of both you and Amy, if you're willing to continue or not. I mean, you're not, we don't have handcuffs on you, but I mean, for my part, I'd love it if you guys continued, but I understand you have to look at your situation.
I'm sure there's like a burning desire from somebody. Why do we normally have these as 2-year positions, right? Like maybe it's time to have a new presence.
They're actually usually 1-year positions, and then you can
Extend them.
Renew for run for a second consecutive year. Yeah.
1-year terms that right, exactly.
I second Suzanne's sentiment, but you know, out of respect for Aaron and Amy's personal opinions about this matter, I think we'll just make it an agenda item for, you know, the whole council to talk about.
And what could you send out, like what positions are up? I'm assuming it's not just Aaron. And
I think it's the chair and the vice chair. And did we agree to, I mean, the committee chairs aren't necessarily, like, we don't vote on them, we appoint them. And I think we extended those as well, right?
We did, yep.
So I'm assuming if we were to hold elections in April, we would take,
We could do committee interest as well, although
I mean,
there aren't
I
really
think
a lot of active committees
right.
right now.
But we should probably convene some committee work, right? I
Mhm.
mean, the Public Art Committee is doing a little bit and needs to do a little bit more in consideration of opening up the community center. And we need to maybe create an event committee, like rename Music in the Park Committee to be some sort of one-time event committee to start looking at planning that, if we're going to do that.
Okay, so I'm kind of hearing that we want to stick with the plan from December to hold elections in April. And we'll make sure that Amy's able to be there as well, so she can participate in the conversation since it impacts her as well. But so we won't make any changes for now, and then we'll just reopen the discussion next month and go from there.
That sounds good.
Okay.
And just as a side note, does anyone want, like, are people actively recruiting members? Are you guys asking friends and people you think might be great Arts Council members? And if so, what are you feeling out there?
I don't know if I want to wade in on any of that. I mean, we have to, Salim, we have to give our community members support and feeling that they want to volunteer in this community. And that's what I'm hearing, is people don't feel that they want to step up at this time.
All right, so you're asking people too. I was just curious. I actually wasn't really alluding to that. It was more like the type of people that I'm asking are parents who are exhausted and just feeling generally like people don't have extra time to give right now. And I'm curious as what we can do to help recruit people. Like, how can we address that pandemic fatigue and ask people to give some time to join us? Because we're awesome and we do great things for the community.
Commit our collaboration with the artists of the community. I mean, that's our opportunity. Let's make that a priority at that time to say, you know, what a great group this is and what they can get out of it. And that let's get a whole pipeline of people out of that event, that, you know, 4 or 5 people that want to line up for the next couple of years to join this group.
Yeah, and that's true. Like, I think to a point Salim had earlier on is that people will get excited if we have some plans for something. You might want to join on and sign up if we have something more defined. So that's a good point. Okay, I just wanted to bring that up because I'm, you know, any chance I get, I ask people that I think would be great for our group. And the responses I get are just like, I'm tapped out, you know? So how can we address that? Because I think we're all feeling that a little bit. So, okay. Well, I think that we are at the end of our meeting. Does anyone have any last thoughts or questions or comments? I kind of wanted to get an idea of if there was any movement with that high school seniors group. Has anyone been in touch with them? No, have they been in touch with anyone?
Mm-hmm.
That was such a great idea. Maybe they'll come back. Okay, if there's no other business, then I would like to remind you to report your volunteer hours for January and February to the link that was emailed to us. And if there's no other business, I will adjourn the meeting at 9:02 and ask you to please stay in your seat until the Zoom has terminated. Good evening, stay safe and healthy. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.